In this episode, I have a chat with two combat experts. I'm joined by Matt and Peter from the Discord as they lead me through how to deliver effective combats in Mythras. Welcome to the Mythras Matters podcast, Season 1, Episode 80, More Than Just Clashing Swords. Hello and welcome to Mythras Matters, a podcast dedicated to the Mythras rule set and all its supplements. As always, I'm your host, Inwils, and welcome to April. Now, you might be aware that I have recently updated my fanzine. Dyson Design is a fanzine for games masters and is completely free. And I'm also proud to say that it is completely AI free. Everything inside the fanzine I have written myself, and I've paid for artists' work, giving them the required credit. If you would like the fanzine delivered to your inbox every month, then you can subscribe using the link in the show notes. I currently have 20 subscribers, so thank you to everyone who has responded to all the posts I have shared. In the April edition of the fanzine, there is an article on combat, and I have to admit that the chat you are about to hear inspired me to write it. I have always enjoyed Mythras combat, but I have to admit that I find it one of the more difficult parts of the rule set. I understand the mechanics of the system, although I have to admit I still have to revert to listening to Matt E's Rule Guru segment when it comes to passive blocking. But I find that my combat often lacks depth and purpose. I was therefore very pleased when Matt and Peter volunteered to give this newbie some sort of combat advice. I have to apologise before we start, since I use this almost as my own personal questions about combat chat. I hope it is useful for you as well. Oh, and do listen right to the end of the episode for a rather funny little outtake. So without further ado, I'll let them introduce who they are and where you can find them.
Hi, I'm Matt E. of Old Bones Publishing. We publish mostly fantasy horror stuff for Mythras and for maybe some other games. And you can find me on the Mythras Discord mostly. And we have a kiosk on drivethrurpg.com.
Very nice. And Asaf, is that right? Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hello. My name's Peter, but I go by Hazaf on the Mythras Discords. I mean, that's kind of the only real place you'll find me with any regularity talking about Mythras. Yeah.
That's good. That's what we need. We need more and more Mythras. So I know, Matt, you have a number of really grandeur titles when it comes to the podcast, but today we're going to be talking about something that always amazes me, and I love the Mythras system because of it, is the combat. And we're going to have a chat about combat, and you are going to be known as my combat experts. So that's another one, Matt, to your ever-growing list. You'll be pleased to know. So let's start off with a really interesting question, I think, is how a lot of people want realism in combat, and a lot of people talk about how realistic the Mythras combat is. So what's your thoughts about the Mythras combat system and how close it is to the real thing?
You want
Peter,
first?
Go ahead. You start. You're the actual expert here, or like we said, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? So maybe you want to explain why.
I do train a little. I train some HEMA, which I believe is what Pete and Lawrence were doing kind of when they came up with Mythras. So I have a similar sensibility about it, I think. And from my experience of tabletop role-playing games, it seems like the closest thing to the HEMA sparring and techniques that I train. So, barring an actual medieval battlefield experience, it does seem like pretty much as close as I could get to it.
So is that I'm a complete novice here. So is that like a martial art, or what kind of fighting is that?
Yes, HEMA it's historical European martial arts. It's technically fencing, but it's not very much like the white suited fencing you get at the Olympics. Right. So it can be fencing with pole arms, with two-handed swords, axes, one-handed sword, a sword and a dagger, sword and cape, sword and shield, all sorts of things like that. It's predominantly medieval, like Renaissance fencing is what I do, but there are people that do like 19th century saber, or there's also much older sword and shield work from like, I think, 10th century sword and shield work. So some of it is historical, like, I don't know quite what you would call it, but it's an exploration of historical martial arts. And some of it is just a martial art that you train, try to get better at. There are competitions and so on.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah. So that sounds like Mythras combat. Perfect. I'm very interested about the cloak and dagger. I'm definitely going to have somebody use that in a next combat that I have.
Ultimate panache.
Yeah, it's so is that where sort of like the idea of weapon reach comes in and things like that?
I think it's clearly informed from that. There are other games that I believe were looking at that beforehand in various ways. Like older RuneQuest had Strike Rank, which made some approximation of that. And I think some of the more Byzantine, older D&D games had weapon lengths and speeds and stuff. But yeah, the way it's handled in Mythras seems like the most sensible kind of rationalization of it I've seen, and it relates very well to what I see in my training in almost all regards. Yeah
Fantastic.
I think
go for it, Matt.
To me that kind of you can invent a system, but then it still needs to be playable at the table, right? It needs to be realistic or give you verisimilitude, which means it feels realistic, even if it's not, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the key, is that it is playable as well, and it's modular. So if you don't want to use the reach rules, you don't need to, and you can still use the rest of the system. So in that sense, it's well designed, which is what I like. I think that is what one of the things that drew me to D100 games back in the day, after having played a lot of AD&D, and that's what I mean, the 1979 hardback books, right?
The best ones. The best ones.
Well, I've made my feelings on AD&D well known on the Discord. It takes any role-playing game that you play, if you're going to emphasize combat in it, you can make it feel real if you're a super GM. and you want to narrate things as they happen. Maybe it's a 20-point wound in D&D or something like that. And you can narrate that to make it seem very serious and interesting and make the players enjoy the whole encounter. But in real life, at most tables, I think that, it just kind of feels like Rock'em Sock'em Robots, where you spend some resources, they spend some resources, you spend, they spend, you spend, they spend, and then eventually someone runs out of dollars or hit points, whatever, first, and then they're the loser, right? And I find that very unsatisfactory. Like I said, it doesn't mean you couldn't create a fun, realistic, and exciting and dangerous feeling combat without all the stuff that Mythras brings, but it just makes it that much harder. I like the structure that Mythras gives to it to make it really feel like you're trading blows, make it really feel like your character's wounded, make it really feel like, oh, you just did something fantastic and via this special effect. So
I think as well, there's a kind of a concrete nature to the rules in Mythras, because a 20-point hit on a first level character in D&D is death, but a 20-point hit on a 10th level character, you don't really know what that means, because hit points are not like a wounding status. They could be your luck, your endurance, your all these kind of nebulous things that put the weight on you to interpret, and not just put the weight on you to interpret, but put the weight on you to interpret in a way that is dramatic, and it's not helping you in the same way that I think the more direct meat to hit points relationship you have in a game like Mythras does. Yeah. Right.
There are a number of telltale things in a rule system that let me, that tell me how realistic or how close to real life fighting is in that game. Things like, what happens if you fall off a roof? And what happens if you get ambushed by a pack of wolves? That's my favorite example, right? And if you are going to be realistic about it, if you're a single person out in the wild and you get ambushed by a pack of wolves, that's it. You're dead. You're dead. And that may not be so much fun in a role-playing game, right? But the point is, that should be like a possible result. But if you're a 10th level character, and again, I haven't played a modern edition, so if you're a 10th level character in AD&D, you can ignore that pack of wolves, or you can kill them all single-handedly. And that's it. And I think that the people alive, when Gary Gygax was GMing and everything, would have some strong remarks about that, like, oh, you're not meant to use the rules that way. Well, then please write down some rules that I am meant to use in the book that you charged me $50 for. So
you were saying about the modular nature of the combat, and you pick and choose what you want to play. Do you think there's a danger in that, in the sense that it's becoming less and less realistic if you start taking elements out? I was thinking like combat weapon reach and maybe passive blocking, and things like, if you decide not to do that, is it like changing the whole feel of the combat?
For my part, I think that goes to like the problems I have with 100 hit points in Dungeons and Dragons. If you take away the framework, then you're left with interpretation. And then, so what does it mean then if you've got your shield on one side, you don't have the action points to use it, but you've got a big 5 foot by 3 foot plank of wood on one side? Does that do anything or nothing or whatever? And you have some concrete ways to consistently use it with passive blocking. And the same for if you have a long weapon versus a short weapon, there's a framework to use them. And I think that is good. They don't always come up, and you can opt to not use them, but they are there so that when you do want them, if it does become important to a certain situation, you know how it's worked out. It's not that you then have to think as the GM and do something that is equitable and that you will remember to do next time it comes up when it's the other way around. Yes. So it doesn't feel like you benefited one side or the other.
Consistency is a big thing. Yeah, right.
Yes.
I think that because I like them so much, and they are important when they come into play. I would not play without the reach rules, for example, but that's me. So we sometimes talk about cognitive load on the game master who has a lot to do during play. When the proper framework is in place, it reduces the cognitive load because the game master can categorize a situation into, a recognizable one that therefore they know how to deal with. This is a polearm versus a dagger. I need to use the reach rules. See page 105 or whatever it is in the book.
Yeah.
Or, this is going to be a very simple combat because it is two guys slugging it out just with daggers in the street, and they don't have any armor, they don't have any shield, so there's probably going to be a lot of like evading and stuff. So now I have to say to myself, okay, I should make sure that I have the evade rules firmly in hand to run this scene. Maybe there's darkness, maybe there's something slippery on the ground because it's an alleyway and they always have puddles, right? That kind of stuff. So you begin to think about those things instead. When the rules are sufficient, then I think it lowers the GM's difficulty in trying to construct a scene in their head and know what to do. And that is one of the nice things about Mythras. I think it gives you all the tools you need for 90% or more of situations. And so as long as you study the book enough, it means that you're well prepared to handle it, or you can be well prepared on game night.
Right. Well, one of the best things I like about Mythras are the special effects. And this idea that you can trip or blind or subdue, etc. Do you feel it's important that everybody in the actual game, i.e. From bandits up to giants, all use those special effects, or is there some kind of a graduated scale, that ruffians don't have it, but dragons will? What's your thoughts about special effects? Matt? I'm going to call out a name now.
Well, it sounds like you're asking two different things. I use special effects for whoever's fighting, whether it's a critter who probably has, with a different mentality, has a shorter list of go-to special effects, but then it sounds like you're also bringing into the idea of, rules for mooks, right? Like do rabble and underlings get to choose. And that's addressed in the rule book, actually. So yeah, there are those simplifying rules if you want to use them. And if you're going to be running a band of like 20 villagers versus your 3 player characters, and the villagers maybe fall into a nice convenient category of they don't really know what they're doing and they're not super committed. So yeah, maybe they would run away if they took serious wounds. The rules are there. I personally keep it to me, the simplest thing to do is to let everybody play by the same rules and not use the mook rules. I don't know what Peter does, but
largely the same. And also, because I enjoy the combats of them so much, I always think that you're writing the character out through their actions. And even with the same chosen special effect, like the difference between, say, a ninja tripping you up or, a drunk with a bar stool tripping you up, the rule, like, it would look very different in the film, right? but it's the same special effect, right? They
Right.
trip opponent. So yeah, I think you just write it with your actions. So if you want to be like sweeping everyone's leg and flipping out the window as the escaping ninja, that's one way to use those special effects. Or if you're some big drunken oaf and you're just running through everyone on your way to smash through the door and leave the saloon, that's a different kind of use of the same things, but you're still playing the characters, or you're running the NPCs as characters as a GM, and you use those tools to say what they are like and what they're doing. And I think, so where they have the options, I also think it comes down to motivation as well. Like, somebody, I wouldn't often choose, for instance, bleed or impale for somebody who was in no way trying to kill their opponent. Like, they're more likely to be trying to subdue them or possibly cuff them with the sword hilt or something. And so they would use some other way to apply damage that isn't shank them until they die.
Exactly.
But again, it's dictated by the character. And so, like a wolf could impale you with its fangs, but that probably would do that anytime it wants to. Whereas a human with a knife just trying to get you to get out of their shop or something.
Yeah, right.
A different choice. Yeah.
Right. That's well said. These are, and again, this is one of the things that people new to the system, I think it fills them with dread. That's when you see the whites of their eyes is, oh, I have this huge menu of special effects to choose from. Some of them might not be allowed because I'm not using the right weapon or whatever. But yeah, there's still this big menu. And how do I know what to do? What is the best one to choose for this situation? I think there's a lot of analysis paralysis that can creep in. And once again, it comes down to that old idea of the GM being the helping hand who says, you tell me what your character is really trying to accomplish here. Or it sounds to me like, Bob the Barbarian really wants to, and then you let the player explain what's on their mind, and then you point them in the right direction. Yeah. Again, you have to have that certain familiarity, but not everybody at the table has to be familiar in ultimate detail with all of the rules all the time. The game master, or if you're lucky enough, the other person at your table who's not the game master, who is the rules expert, one person needs to know what's going on and to be helpful. So that's nice. Yeah. And that something you said in the beginning, Ian, in this game, winning fights, well, first of all, combat is not sport. Like in D&D, because of the way encounters are structured and because of the way the rules are written and because of the way experience is handed out, it's just like encounter 1, encounter 2, encounter 3, encounter 4, take a rest, and then maybe something plot oriented happens or whatever, but it's all about fighting. And it's essentially your chance to show how cool your heroes in chainmail, superheroes in chainmail are, right? And to engage all of your feats and stuff that your guy can do, right? Because that's how things are defined in that game. But in Mythras, there are a lot of times when combat is the fail state. Like if you get into a fight, it's because you couldn't figure out something more creative to do. And now things have gone wrong. And now you're stuck fighting. It's not that you wanted to get in this situation, but here you are. And now what? And of course, animals and monsters, sometimes that's all they do is that, you walked into their lair, they're going to fight you. Okay, that's fine. That makes sense. And that can be dramatic and scary. And that's how it should be. But, in Mythras, fighting is not the default state. It's often the fail state. And running away is often a good idea, or otherwise finding a way to end combat that doesn't result in anybody dying. And it's not about resource attrition. It's not about bringing your opponent down to 0 hit points. The things that end fights are wound effects and special effects in Mythras. It's either because, you've got this person, you got to bleed on them. And that means that once you shift away from a a round by round time accounting, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, in a couple of minutes without medical care, that person who's bleeding is going to die.
Yeah.
And so basically, if you want to get someone out of a fight, get a bleed on them and walk away.
Yeah.
Because they have to take care of themselves. And if they're an animal or something, they can't, right? They have to take care of themselves or else they're going to die. And that's probably more important to them than fighting with you. So one good slash on them, get your bleed, and then just try to disengage.
Walk
away.
Yeah.
And that problem's going to take care of itself. And it might be narratively very interesting too.
So one of the things that I always find very daunting is when you're sort of like setting up an opponent, because there's quite a large array of weapons, and I'm not a combat expert at all, so I have no idea the tactical advantages of a long spear towards a short sword. Do you think when you equip your opponents, do you think there's an important point there that you're dictating how that fight is going to go?
For me, I would think usually not so much about the fight. I'd think, what is the character? Like, some people might have a courtly sword, or they might have halberd because they stand guard outside the door, and that's what you're supposed to carry. Even if they're not great at fighting with a halberd, that's what they need for their job every day. I would think mostly along those lines, like, what does this person need to have with them? And then after that, I think about things like where they would fight in this scenario that I'm setting up. Or if I'm the player, like where I can draw them to have to fight. If, I'm thinking, these guys with the halberds, they won't like these narrow corners and stuff. So let's go back that way. So I think about what they have, what they need to have with them, and then what effects that will have as player or GM. That's my thinking on it.
I think that also, to some extent, it comes down to, when you're writing up these opponents, these characters, it also dictates what kind of combat style they're going to have, right? Which then gets you to combat style traits. And if they're critters, creature abilities, right? So if you are dealing with something that's an ambush predator, guess what? It's going to use stealth. It's going to use its leaper ability or whatever to try to jump on you from above, like a panther or something, right? You're not even going to know that it's there until you're on the ground and it's biting your neck. That's the goal of that animal, and that's how it should be constructed. That's going to dictate which special effects it chooses and whether or not it's trying for surprise instead of like a straight up rush at you. If it's a Cape Buffalo or something, it's going to rush at you and try to trample you, and that's totally different, right? So it matters a lot. If you're going to encounter somebody who's a hunter and they're out doing their job hunting, guess what? They're going to have missile weapon, spear, knife for skinning things afterwards, and a hatchet so that they can, chop firewood and stuff. And, oh, by the way, it's handy, right? So that kind of stuff. So those things are going to provide you with a really different set of options than your town guard who's going to have a halberd or maybe someone with a mace and a shield, something like that. So once you know their combat style, and that will dictate like their preferred tactics and what they're good at, their go-to moves, right?
It's who they are, isn't it?
Exactly. It's maybe only part of who they are, but if it's a town guard and you got to get past the town guard, maybe that's pretty much all that they are. You don't want to know about their spouse and kids. You just want to know about their weapons.
Yes.
It always worries me as a GM at this point because I find the surprise rules in Mythras lethal. I often worry that I'm creating a scenario, especially from ambush, that will effectively, or has the potential just to, wipe out the party in one, So how, when you're thinking about when or where the actual combat is going to take place, what do you need to think about to make sure that the characters or the players have a good chance of survival, shall I say?
Well, let me ask a different question. I'll counter your question with a question. Do you believe?
And then we'll go back to my original question.
Yes. Do you believe in balanced encounters?
I think I don't want to create an encounter that it looks like it's been designed in such a way to have no hope of survival.
Okay. So you kind of skirted it, but good for you. That's almost exactly the same way I feel about it. I don't want the players to feel like they have no chance, that it's totally unfair to them necessarily. Now, that said, Hassef will remember one particular encounter at the end of one particular scenario that was just killer. It's a recipe for TPKs. And I did it on purpose. I did it on purpose for genre purposes, because
hang on, I need to write that down. This is for genre purpose.
Right. This was a straight up horror scenario in a fantasy setting, and it was of a type where you're going to encounter something horrendous at the end. And the only question is, what do you do? And for people who play Call of Cthulhu, you'll be very familiar with this vibe. Okay? It was that kind of a scenario where you turn the final corner and you wonder why you didn't meet anything really bad yet. It's because it's happening right now. That was the purpose of that set piece right there. So I
feel that I've played this. Have I GM'd this adventure?
We didn't get that far. Unfortunately, our play-by-post game fizzled out before we got to that scene in that adventure.
Right. I'm sure I have GM'd a similar adventure that you've created, Matt, that has a very powerful end point.
I can think of two.
There might be a pattern here, Matt.
So my point of view is, like I said, I'm like you. I don't want to cheat players and have them say, "Oh my God, why would you do that? That's like totally unfair." On the other hand, I bring up this scene from The Matrix, right, where Neo is talking to the other possible chosen ones, and the little kid says to him, "Nobody can bend a spoon with your mind, but what you need to realize is there is no spoon."
Dude, yes.
And that's the thing. When it comes to balanced encounters in Mythras, there is no spoon. It's not a concept. It's a concept you can invent and put on the game, but some monsters that you can find just flipping through the bestiary in the back of the book, you can find some monsters that are probably not defeatable by almost any party. Like if you go up against a dragon or something like that, you're nuts because you're gonna die. And you need to understand that first. Even something as simple as a tiger or whatever, that's an ambush predator. It can one-shot you, and that's all there is to it. If the tiger is stalking you in the wilds and you don't realize it, and they get the drop on you, someone is toast, pretty much. That's all there is to it. And it may seem a little unfair or whatever, but it's also rather realistic. It's true in real life too. I mean, if you climb that enclosure and you get in the pen with the polar bear, something bad is probably going to happen to you.
Yeah.
So there's that. I also have this idea that there is no spoon, and if I put something in a scenario and the player characters don't have the brains to run away from it, the dice will fall where they fall. Peter,
So
what do you
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think we have pretty similar sensibilities to these things. Yeah, like Matt was saying earlier, that it's kind of a fail state, right? You don't have to fight the dragon. You could just not go in there. You could turn down the job. You could watch it and then run away after you've assessed how powerful it is. Or you could, sneak in, like try to rob it like Bilbo did. Like there's other ways to deal with the threat or to navigate the threat rather than deal with it. 'Cause it may not be something you can deal with in that sense. Yeah.
So
go for it.
I don't want to derail you. You asked a question, so we should answer it, right? Yeah. If you want to design a fight that will be fun, because maybe the players are kind of evenly matched with the opponents, right? It's a little bit difficult because there are a lot of moving parts in Mythras combat. I mean, like in D&D, what do you have? You have like average damage and chance to hit and armor class, right? And maybe that's pretty much it, unless I'm forgetting something. But there are a lot more moving parts in Mythras. Ralil has talked about this a lot on the Discord. The simplest, most basic formula that you can have is take the number of action points on side A times the average combat style score, right? And that's a number. And then do the same thing for the other half. And then compare those two numbers. That will give you a rough guide as to whether, if those numbers are close, it's probably evenly matched. If those numbers are very different, then the side with the higher value is going to probably come out on top. And what you very quickly see then is it really comes down to action points. A party of 3 people with 2 action points each against a critter with 3 or even 4 action points each is probably going to be able to outspend that critter in the action point economy and just plain get more attacks on them and do more unchallenged damage and special effects to them, and therefore win the fight.
That's really interesting as well, in the sense that I don't know if you play M space, but everything has 2 action points in M space. There's no variation at all. And then at the other end, you have classic fantasy that ramps up those action points, every time they go. So the action point economy there is huge, and the more action points you have, the better you're going to be. I don't know if you ever played Shadowrun, but how their system worked is that you started on your highest initiative and took off 10 and you had another attack roll. Yes. And so some people, the samurais street samurais were hitting several times before other people could actually
even move.
And that's almost like the same with action points. Either you have that wonderful ability to parry and attack, because you're not thinking, I have to, if I use everything up to parry or evade, I won't be able to attack. So, and then and M space is, I must say, M space is really easy to do combat rounds, because we just have 2 turns and then that's it. I know nobody will have any more action points left.
A lot of people like that, either 2 or 3 points as universal, unless there is some special reason, like a multi-headed hydra or something. All the player characters will always have 2 or 3. That's quite a popular decision.
Right. I've been working on my own rule set for a different game, and
Sorry. Shock.
and this was one of the biggest decisions that I struggled with in doing the combat system is, should everybody have 2 action points, or should you be able to have more? And I think I have found a way to hybridize it where everybody at base gets like basically 1 attack and 1 parry per round, right? But there are ways to get additional actions in a round, depending on exactly what happens. You can make some choices, but in the rules, I framed the default state as, yeah, you get basically 1 attack and 1 parry per round, and that's how it works. There are ways to do interesting different things, but for new people coming to the system, I wanted to preserve this because I think that's another thing that people have trouble with when they come to Mythras is the difference between the terms cycle, turn, and round. A lot of people don't get what a cycle is. What do you mean there's something smaller than a round as the basic unit of combat? Yeah, the cycle is the basic unit of combat. You get 1 turn every cycle, and you have to take a turn every cycle until everybody's out of action points. That's what merits the passage of time. But we've talked a lot about that in different contexts over the years, as it turns out to be. Right.
I want to go back to one of the things that you both talked about, and it's this idea of motivation of the opponent. So not only I quite like characters versus monsters, but I think the best combat is when it's human versus human, if that makes sense. And when you're looking at the motivation, is it to the point that certain special effects will not be used, like compel surrender, say, if they're intent on killing, and is it a case that they're going to choose location head or choose location just to beat down and destroy that character? How do you decide what they're going to do in that combat moment?
So for me, that's what is the character? Who's fighting? Like an assassin probably isn't going to go for compel surrender, right? They'll go for the head. Whereas, in theory, security forces, police, they will compel surrender. They'll try to grapple you or subdue you. Like they're not going choose location, head, kill. Who the person is what they will do, right? Right. A spider doesn't care about any of that. It wants to inject venom and then wait. It's got a different plan for how it wins. And I think, how they win might be they shout at you until you run away with your tail between your legs, and then they all celebrate at the pub. It's not necessarily to reduce you to 0 hit points or to kill you or capture you. Like there's different ways that a person can win a conflict.
Exactly. Yeah, knowing as a player, understanding the scene and knowing what you want to accomplish is really important. It is not as simple as this is a combat encounter and we have to reduce this thing to 0 hit points again, and that's what victory looks like. Suppose that you're in a situation where you need to, recover a high value target or whatever, but you need them, alive and fairly healthy, but they don't want to be taken by you. Then you start thinking, well, I'm going to use trip opponent, or I'm going to grapple them before they can run away, or, they're trying to hurt me, but I don't really want to hurt them too much. I'm going to try to stun them. You might choose location head, but with the idea of stunning them, not to hurt them. You might choose location weapon arm so that they'll stop attacking you, or whatever, or choose location leg so that, you know, they can't run away from you effectively, and you can eventually get them. Or maybe you were smart and you brought a net and you throw a net on top of them and they can't get away for that reason because you've entangled them or whatever. They can't disengage. Things like that.
Would you ever make an opponent immune to a special effect? For example, saying it doesn't matter how many times the character tries to compel surrender, this person, it will not work. It doesn't matter what the dice roll is, it is not going to work.
Your example is written into the rules. In the rules for compel surrender, it says this only affects opponents who are interested in defending themselves. You can't compel surrender on a zombie. It doesn't care. You can't compel surrender on a Tyrannosaurus Rex because all it wants to do is eat you. And you're tiny and it isn't. So it won't work. You know, compel surrender is, for humans versus humans or whatever, humanoids, and where they don't really want to die. But if you have a creature that doesn't spend action points on defending, there's your sign that you can't use compel surrender.
Okay. So
same with bleed. Can't use bleed on a zombie. Doesn't matter.
What about something like disarm? Would you get to the point that you would say, no matter how hard a character tries, you cannot disarm this opponent? And I'm not thinking of the sense that they've got a blade instead of a hand, so they can't.
Yes.
You know, would you get to the point that you will say, no, that special will not affect that person?
That's a real judgment call. Like, there are a couple places in the rules where it mentions obliquely things like that, like a character, like in the rules for wounding, if you get a serious wound, you drop whatever you're holding, unless it's a shield strapped to your arm or something similar like that. You might rule that your guy has a dagger and the opponent has a hoplite shield strapped to their arm or whatever, and that you can't disarm them of that shield by using your dagger. You, as a GM, you know, you should have the latitude to make a ruling like that. Or if it's a specially designed thing, you know, where it's tied to their hand or something like that. Essentially, like the example you gave, the sword is their hand or something, right? I think there are some cases, but I would resist doing it in general. But the usual bigger rule always applies. If it makes sense to the GM, then that's what's true in this world, right?
Peter?
I think, most of the time I would say no. If it is possible, then it can be attempted. I might have like a special situation. Like, I'm remembering not well enough to know where it's from, but do you remember Nightcrawler from the X-Men? I know you like the X-Men.
Oh,
right?
yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and he has 5 effective prehensile limbs. And I'm sure I've seen a situation where somebody did disarm him straight into either his tail or his feet. And so, yes, you did it, but it had no effect. So I might have a special rule for someone like him that he's just going to catch it and carry on. Yeah. He's that kind of person. But that's, for me, is effectively the same as it's his armor has a blade sticking off it. You can't do it on this. But if it's not, if it's just, you know, only Bruce Lee with his sword, then it's hard because it's Bruce Lee, but you can do it.
Yeah, right. There's one special rule that I'll point out. Some creatures have immunities to things.
Yeah. This is why you're the rules guru, see, Matt.
I remember stuff. Come on. So there are some things that are straight up immunities. Like again, we go back to zombies. Zombies are immune to the the extra effects of wounding. So like if you cut a zombie's arm off, it doesn't have the arm to use anymore, but it doesn't go into shock. It doesn't fall down. It doesn't
make the endurance check.
There are other special ones, like it was introduced in Monster Island for the gods that walk, who are the kaiju like.
Yes.
Godzilla type giant monsters on Monster Island. They have effect immunity as one of their creature abilities. And that means that unless you're firing a ballista at them, they don't get impaled by regular size things like spears and arrows. It doesn't matter to them.
Yeah.
And they don't take bleed or stun unless it's from like a siege weapon scale thing. And that's kind of a half-assed rule that's kind of a added on rule to try to address massive creatures, and it makes sense, and it's one way to handle it, but it's not something that the rules handle like by default. And there are other, if you were going to be that way, you can go and say, oh, well, a dragon doesn't have effect immunity, so obviously I can impale this dragon with my arrow. And, if it's the Hobbit and you're Bard and you got ignore armor, you can do that. But in other cases, I think the GM might want to say, yeah, guess what? This dragon is size 125. Your arrow is nothing to it.
Yeah. Not going to have an effect.
To be fair, with the rules as written, though, the disarm, opponent, and impaled both have a scale of, like, an arrow going into a human is a certain amount of debilitation, whereas going into a horse, it's much less. Going into a rabbit, it would be crippling. Like there is a scale like that. Same with disarm. Like if your weapon sizes are very different, so you can't use your Stanley knife to get the tree out of a giant's hand. It'll just be too difficult.
Right. Eventually the damage, the modifier to the roll becomes impossible or whatever.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. There's that. So, well spotted.
So, I can't leave combat without talking about ranged weapons, because I have to say it's a lot of players that I've worked with. It's the most disappointing rule that is there, that reload of the ranged weapons, because they want to be Legolas, they want to be Aragorn and firing it, but even if you take the special of rapid reload, it still doesn't give that. I think it gives a realistic view.
Yes.
But nobody wants realism.
Yes, exactly. And when we play Classic Fantasy, Mr. Pickles' little gnome rogue, it's a running joke now that it takes 3 turns for her to reload her sling, before it gets fired off. Do you feel that from the realistic point of view that ranged weapons have been hit hard, or do you think it's just right? We go from you, Peter. Go for it.
Yeah, both those things are true. I think it is realistic. I think there are some already there in the rules as written ways to reduce that, and there have been a lot of popular and sensible homebrew rules to further make that manageable for impatient archers, like having a trait maybe where you can hold arrows in the hand and then that gives you already 1 turn less load, or setting up, like if you are like looking over the field of battle and you set your 12 arrows in the ground in front of you and it's easy to shoot. So you can do homebrew rules or combat style traits to bring it down further. But I mean, I'm not a very experienced archer, but the rules as written are faster than I am. And I think, especially when you consider the weirdness of a game like Dungeons and Dragons, where you stab me, then I shoot you with my bow, then you stab me again, until one of us And it's like, that seems preposterous to me, especially in a game where you have reach. So if I can get behind your spear with my knife, that's all good for me. But if I get up to you with a bow, then we're on a level footing, except you've got a more powerful weapon. It's just, it doesn't hold up for me. And I wouldn't want to play with it in some way that was too far removed from what I feel is realistic and dramatic. I think, the problem is that it stops you from having a melee archer that can just shoot. You would have to shoot, wait, or shoot, and then change your tactic to a different weapon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you've just said it, Peter. You used the phrase melee archer, and that should be an oxymoron for us.
Yes.
If you want to have an effective ranged combatant, they need to stay out of the fray so that nobody can close on them and they can keep firing, even though it takes them a while to reload. And there's more than one type of, ranged weapon too. If you're flinging javelins at somebody, which is a fan favorite on the Mythras Discord, javelins. If you're flinging javelins at somebody, it is ready weapon, throw, ready weapon, throw, ready weapon, throw. Or if you're using like daggers or hand axes or something like that, ready weapon, throw. Nobody seems to have much of a problem with that. But then once you start talking about arrows or whatever, or slings, then it starts to bother people more. So from a GM perspective, I think that when someone starts your game and says, I want to be an archer, that's the point where the GM ought to say to them, great, but you need to realize that you might do a lot of standing around. So we need to design your character carefully where, maybe you want to have a combat style trait that lets you, reload faster, like Asaf said, or you want to have a well-rehearsed tactic where you set up, 10 meters, 20 meters outside of wherever the fray is going to be. And that's where you go from, like a sniper. I mean, that's what snipers in the real world do. You're not supposed to know where they are. They're just supposed to be able to do their thing without anyone messing with them. So because the system is more realistic than some others, I do think that it could be unfun for an archer. I admit this. But at the same time, I think that as long as you give full disclosure up front, there's plenty of creative stuff that you can do to, make your archer be fun, even though they're not getting in a blow every round, or every cycle.
I'm just thinking there's no minimum range for bows, isn't there? You can't use it if your opponent is X meters close to you, or is there no rule about that, Matt, rules guru?
I think you're correct. I think the answer is no, but I also think that you can't freely reload a weapon when you're engaged in melee combat. I don't know if it says that in the book, but it says it in my head. It's
and that's the only place that matters.
You got it. Yeah. If someone's swinging their sword at you, I don't think you get to just reload your weapon. Yeah. I think you probably have to roll athletics or something to do that, and firing at them when they are 2 feet away from you. That becomes maybe something too. I don't know. Aiming is a thing when someone is that close. You're meant to, envision it physically. You're meant to be able to have a certain amount of distance. And if you can't aim properly, then maybe that affects your ability to hit them with a penalty grade or something. So there are ways to handle it.
Looking at the section on ranged weapons, it says they cannot usually be performed. Ranged attacks cannot usually be performed if the attacker is moving at a gait faster than a walk, because their aim will be thrown off by the movement.
Right.
And
so
then
that's
it
if the
talks about the
attacker is
exception.
moving. Yeah.
Yeah, but you would think that engaged in combat is typically more energetic than walking.
Yeah, right. It's different, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Although I think, and I might be wrong, I think reloading your bow is like a ready weapon
Yes.
action. So there's no indication that you can't do it. I love that bit that Legolas, the orc is too close to fire his bow, so he just sticks it in the eye with the arrow. Pulls it out, draws it, and fires it at somebody else. And I just love that.
Very cinematic, yes.
Yeah. Well, sometimes I want it to be cinematic.
That is a thing. I think that you have to tune things to that. The thing I always think about is a adventure world like Star Wars. Every character can leap out of the way of laser fire there, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's just normal and it's accepted. Like, we don't do that anywhere else pretty much. Like, that's a death sentence, if you're in the open and somebody shoots a gun at you. But for that world, it makes sense. And you might also get into things like catching arrows or catching spears in those kinds of heroic wushu, or Viking stories. So, like, there may be things that are somewhat supernatural, like, but they're accepted for this genre.
There's a great scene in the Northman where the main berserker character catches a spear that's thrown at him and throws it back at the dude. He kills him. It's just like, oh man, very cinematic.
Yes. Isn't there a film called Big Trouble in Little China or something?
Yes.
And I'm sure in that one, he throws a knife and the guy catches it and throws it back, which I always like the idea of that. This has been fantastic. I've learned so much. I almost feel ashamed of some of my combats now. That I don't use specials for every. I have a graded approach, so as their combat skill goes up, characters can use it, but if I've got bandits with 30%, they don't use specials. It's only when it gets high. I am a lover of fatigue in combat.
Yes.
So, every 2 or 3 rounds, depending on their constitution, they're rolling. We have a lot of new people coming to Mythras and new GMs. So each of you in turn, what would be your go-to points, your advice to these new people who are trying to, GM combat in Mythras for the first time? What advice would you give to them? We'll come to you first, Matt.
Well, combat is not about resource attrition. It's about winning effects, basically. Combat is often a fail state. You probably don't actually want to get involved in combat because, just like in real life, bad things might happen to you. And fair fights are not a thing. Again, there is no spoon, and we go back to that idea of the ambush predator. If a tiger is stalking you in the jungle and you don't know it, probably something really bad is going to happen to you. And that's the kind of stuff that is easily reflected in the game too. Now, if you are the GM and you think your players are not going to enjoy that, or even more strongly object to it because you're not being fair to them, well, like I said,
play D&D.
Play D&D. I'm not saying you shouldn't do it. I'm saying that as a GM, you should realize what you're doing beforehand. And so there are ways that you could, some vague calculations that you can do to tell, oh, did I accidentally, create a TPK situation here without even meaning to? But on the other hand, like I said in things I've written and sold, sometimes there are encounters in there that you had better find another way around, and maybe running away is a good idea.
Yeah.
So you need to be aware of that as a player and a GM, that because the combat is fairly realistic in Mythras, death and painful death is a really likely possibility in some cases. So don't do it by accident. Don't be afraid of doing it, but don't do it by accident, right?
Yeah. Peter, what would be your chosen advice?
So for brand new players and DMs, like if the group is moving to Mythras to try it out, I think a deadly combat with pre-gens that has no bearing, like do that once or twice, see how quickly you can die and kill, and how you might like special effects that feed off of another player or that help them out or that change the combat in other ways, like all the trip opponents, disarm. And there's a lot of like tactical Mythras use when you know, oh, I've got a terrible roll, but I won the special effect. So you can choose a special effect that cannot be resisted, like press advantage, or you've rolled exceedingly well and you think, oh, well, then now's the time to bleed them or something, something they won't be able to resist my chosen effect. Yeah. But then also I think when you are actually playing the game, like that thing about it's who the people are, who the NPCs are, what they want, like who wants to murder these 4 or 5 guys? Like probably not many people, right? You might get into a fist fight with a swordsman, or there's, you're fighting in the town square and there's 1,000 people there to see you murder someone or not murder them. So what are you going to do? Like you still have to live on after the fight. And so do the NPCs. Like a lot of the time for me when I'm running it, I'm thinking, well, at this point, these guys, they're just back off. You knocked out the loudmouth leader and these other guys thought he was the tough one. So they're not going to try to fight the guy that knocked him out. They disperse or, gather up their fallen and go. And as a player, I've often found that I'm in a similar situation where, suddenly we've scored enough wounds that we are now winning. We didn't come here to murder the guards. Like, you might tell them, now get out of here. Like, drop your weapons. It doesn't have to come to the death. And, that changes, if it's the dragon that sees you making off with its gold, it's probably got a different agenda. But some animal that feeds, maybe it just wants to take one of you, or it'll be happy with a pack animal or something, or it'll give up. Like, the ambush predator, if you spotted it and it realizes it's been spotted, it will go away. It might ambush you again later, but they don't think, all right, well, I'll take down one of them. Well, they're not, that's not how they act. It's not who they are as an NPC.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for giving up your time to be on the podcast.
Thank you.
Please do keep an eye on the YouTube place on my channel, because that is where all the comments will appear, and I will be leaving them to you to answer. Thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity. This has been fun.
Thanks. Glad to.
I found the chat so helpful, but I did feel that there were so many questions that I wanted to ask the combat duo that we didn't have time to explore. So in anticipation of future episodes, I have already recruited them to talk about certain aspects of combat and encounters. For example, chases in combats, dealing with multiple opponents, aerial and pack attacks, and dealing with darkness, surprise, and unusual terrain. So look out for these episodes in the future. Remember, if you would like to contribute to the podcast, then why not just drop me an email or message and let me know what you would like to cover. We are always looking for reviews or chats with people. So if you are interested, you can email me at inwils@gmail.com or send me a message on the Discord or various forums I frequent. There are a lot of new people coming to Mythras. Hooray! So if you have any questions, then do let us know. We are a very supportive community. Also, I'm hoping to record a podcast episode in the future on how best to move from Dungeons and Dragons to Mythras. So hopefully we can help with anyone who is thinking or making the migration. And that's it, another episode of Mythras Matters completed. You can find the links to my YouTube channel, digital download shop, and the Dice and Design fanzine in the show notes. There is also now a new membership tier on my YouTube channel that gives you access to a monthly campaign toolkit. For April, the topic is all about factions. In advance, thank you for your support. And remember, if you have any questions or comments for Matt and Peter, do drop them in the comment section on YouTube or tackle them on the Discord. So until next time, have a great month of gaming, and I will chat to you all again in May. Until then, I hope all your posed roles succeed and provide you with a well-deserved special. Thanks for listening, everyone. See ya. Bye. The content of this podcast is covered by the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license, so please give appropriate credit if you are sharing or copying any part of this podcast. Thank you. Effect.
The washing machine has finished running.
Excellent.
Just so you know.
That's I love that.
I was a missing part of your show, hasn't it?
That
But
is
now the
going.
most burning question.
If you don't mind, that is going after the credits.
That's all right.
Yeah. I can't even remember what I was. Oh, yeah. So